So what we have here is some wheat. And wheat will end up going to the factory. And then the factory will go ahead and change the wheat to become some bread. And then also we have iron. And iron will go to the steel mill. And the steel mill will go ahead and process the iron along with the other things, and that will become steel. So we can also do this. We can go ahead and process things also in math. And what we have is kind of like a function machine here. And a function machine, it takes in an input of 1, and we have an output of 3. So there could be a couple things happening to that 1. What do you think it is? And then, but what we need to do is we need to do another one to figure out if that's the case, if what you're guessing is right. So we'll put in 2. And after we put 2 in, we'll have an output of 6. So maybe what your hypothesis was, or what your guess was you're getting a little bit more clear. And then let's just double check it. We have an input of 3, and then we have an output of 9. So what has happened to the numbers? Let's see. 1 became 3, 2 became 6, and 3 became 9. So most of you are looking at this saying, okay, it's multiply by 3. And that's the rule that we have. So on your notes page, what I'd like you to do is to go ahead and write this in at the top of the page. Please write in an input of x, the function rule of y equals 3x, an output of y, and then the coordinates of x, y. So what we want to do is first number we want to input is 1. That's what we did on our function table. We're going to say 3 times 1. What we did is we took this 1 and we're substituting it in for the x value. Okay? Once we do that, we end up with 3. And so now we can take that 1 and that 3, our input and our output, and create a coordinate point out of it, making it 0.13. Next, I have an input of 2. I'm going to substitute that 2 in. Remember, we just did substitution. I'm substituting that 2, which is my x value, and I'm substituting it into my rule, which is 3x. So 3 times 2, and I end up with 6. And I can create the coordinate point of 2, 6. Then I have my final input of 3. And I can go ahead and substitute that 3 into my rule, which is 3 times 3 in this case, because our x value was 3. And 3 times 3 is 9. And so now we have a coordinate of 3, 9. So now that we have these coordinates, let's go ahead and graph it. Here's our table. You have the table right there on your page. So our first coordinate point is 1, 3. So again, we go over 1 and up to 3. Our next point is 2, 6. We go over 2, up to 6. Our final point is 3, 9, over 3, up to 9. Now this is what we call a linear function. The reason why it's a linear function is because these points create a straight line. So then the question is, if x was 0, what would y be? And so we could substitute 0 in for x, or follow our line, and we end up at 0, 0. Okay, next, find the value of y. So here's our next table of values. We have x. Fill in your next table down in your notes. We have x. Y equals x plus 3. We have our y value, and then we have xy. And if you feel confident enough to go ahead and do this on your own and then check it, please do. Or if you don't feel confident enough, go ahead and follow along. Make sure you put in your x values of -1, 0, and 1. So here's our rule. Our first x value is -1. Now remember, we want to substitute in that -1 for our x value, and we end up with -1 plus 3. See that -1 got substituted in for x, and that's why we're adding -1 and 3 together. That 3 just comes straight down because that's part of the rule. So our y value is 2. So our coordinate point is going to be -1, 2. Our next x value is 0. And I'm going to substitute that 0 in for x, and I have 0 plus 3. And so 0 plus 3 gives me 3. And so my coordinate point is 0, 3. Again, if I'm going too fast at any time, please pause this. Finally, I have 1 as my x value. I'm going to substitute that 1 in for x. And I have 1 plus 3, and that gives me 4. And so now I have the coordinate point 1, 4. So then we can go ahead and graph it on the graph right beside it. We have y equals x plus 3. So our first coordinate point is -1, 2. So back 1, up to 2. Stay at 0, go up to 3, over 1, up to 4. And again, this is a linear function. Okay, it creates a straight line, and it's a function because none of our x values repeat. So we can say that. And so the question is, if x is -3, what would y be? And you could go back on your x-axis to -3 and say y is 0, or we could substitute it in. -3 plus 3 is 0. Substitute that -3 in. Finally, we're kicking it up a notch. And our rule is 2x plus 1. We have our x, our 2x plus 1, and our y. Again, pause this so you can copy it down. I'm going to move on. My x values are 1, 2, and 3. So my first x value is 1. If you want to work this out on your own, of course, pause it, try it on your own, go back and fix it. That's the best way to learn from your mistakes. So I have 2x plus 1. Now, remember, 2 and x side by side means multiply. So I'm going to write 2 times 1 plus 1. So I have to do that multiplication first. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 gives me 3. See how I took that 1? This is my x value. I took 1, substituted it in for x, because 1 is my current x value. And then I have a coordinate point of 1, 3. Now my new x value is 2. So I'm going to take that 2, substitute it in now for x, okay? X was 1. Now we're assigning x the value of 2. So it's going to be 2 times 2 plus 1. And I'm going to end up with a y value as 5. Now I want to assign x a new value. This is my independent variable. It's what I choose. And whatever I choose x to be, okay, it makes my output dependent on that. So my y value is my dependent variable. So, oh, I'm sorry, my coordinate point of 2, 5. My final x value is 3. So now I substitute that 3 in for x, and I say 2 times 3 now. So 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1, I get 7, and my final coordinate point of 3, 7. So now we can graph it. Here's our points. 1, 3, over 1, up to 3. Remember, you always do your x first, then your y. You got to remember which is your x and y axis. Over 2, up to 5, and then over 3, up to 7. Again, this is linear. This is a straight line. It is a function. So we go ahead and we have a line like this. So we could go ahead and we could look at tables. It says y equals x minus 1. Which of these contains the values of x minus 1? What I would do is I would say, okay, negative 1 minus 1, that makes negative 2. That works. 0 minus 1, that equals negative 1. That works. 1 minus 1 does not equal 2. So A does not work. I go down to B. Negative 1 minus 1 is not 0. So that's a table that would not work. I go to C. 0 minus 1 does not equal 1. That doesn't work. Let me check the last one. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. 2 minus 1 is 1. So D would be our correct answer.